Hello there, my name's Phil Suddle and I run Suddle Economics, a macroeconomic research firm. I just sent out a note on US commercial construction to my clients. And I think this is an interesting topic for macro investors for two basic reasons. First, commercial construction is one of those sectors that is most sensitive to interest rate moves. So if you're trying to get a sense of how much the Fed's affecting the economy, it's a good place to look. Second, with the recent banking turmoil that flared up in March and has faded away somewhat, the sector I think has become a bit of a focus for systemic risk. Is this going to be the next housing crisis? In my note, I address both of these issues square on, and my bottom line is that actually so far, the damage of interest rates to construction spending has been remarkably limited. And there are some sectors even that seem to be booming in the face of interest rate hikes. And the second key message is that so far the systemic implications are limited. And that I think has a lot to do with the fact that much of this debt is held in a very sticky fashion on banks' balance sheets and is not therefore subject to big market pricing moves and the sort of sudden onset of the sort of panic that caused the housing market to fall apart in 2007, 2008. So let me illustrate those points a little more, just using three simple pairs of slides. In the first, you can see the evolution of spending in construction, commercial construction in certain key areas. On the left-hand side, you've got goods producing areas, mining and manufacturing. And in the right-hand side, you've got service producing areas. And what you can see is that the service sector construction related business sort of went down and stayed down. The most obvious case is office construction. On the other hand, and this is the point I was making earlier about some booms going on, we're seeing a pickback in mining construction activity, meaning oil exploration, but most notably in the manufacturing sector, where factories are being built at the most rapid clip since the 1990s. In the second pair of slides, what I'm doing here is looking at what you might call occupancy or vacancy rates across different service sector categories. And, hotels were a big worry early in the pandemic because obviously no one was using them. But they've come back to a level where occupancy rates are about 5% or so below where they were pre-pandemic. I think that tells you for the hotel business, things aren't as good as they were pre-pandemic, but it's not a big problem. By contrast, the office sector is in a structural problem. Clear issues here because with the lack of people going back to work, with new construction coming on stream, the vacancy rate is now up to 19% at a national level. And of course, in some jurisdictions, some cities, it's higher and rising rapidly, especially on the West Coast. Finally, I've got a pair of pictures that look at the financial aspects of what's going on, and in particular draw this contrast out between a fast-moving market that kind of reflects concerns and possibly panics, and a slower-moving banking environment. On the left-hand side, you see the relatively limited amount of commercial real estate debt that's traded in free markets, in the bond market, the so-called CMBS market. And you can see that especially since March, those spreads have gapped wider relative to a comparison asset class, for example, high-yield debt, where spreads have actually tightened as recession fears have eased. On the right-hand side, you can see banks' holdings of commercial property debt and specifically the extent to which there are delinquencies on this debt. And for all the gloom that we've had, including in the office sector over the last 2 or 3 years developing, what is so remarkable is that delinquency rates on these assets are pretty much still at an all-time low. Far lower than previous problem periods for the sector, and in particular lower than they were during the good times in the 2000s and after 2014-15. This last point about low delinquency rates, of course, reflects the very benevolent effects until recently of low Fed interest rates. But as these have risen and as more commercial real estate debt on banks' books comes up for renewal, so rates will rise, and as rates rise and prices remain under pressure, so problems in the sector will mount, adding up to what I call a slow burn of a fuse until we get problems. And I think those problems will come, potentially quite big problems in some areas, will come as we go through and come out of the next recession, rather than being an explicit cause of it. Well, thanks for listening, and if you find what I've said interesting, why not, and you're not already a subscriber, why not think about a trial at Subtle Economics, and here's how you can go about doing that. Thanks.